All right, guys, today we're going to continue our series on our post-draft rankings of the 2023 NFL Draft class. Today is going to be very critical, especially for those of you that play Superflex. A little bit of a dead giveaway there, but we don't care. You're already here in the video. You already saw the title. So, as always, stick around for the rankings. Let me know how this helps out your rookie draft. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like. Comment down below whether you agree or disagree, and I'll see you after that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football for the second installment of our post-draft rankings of the 2023 NFL Draft class. Again, going through after this wild draft and seeing how it shook up our rankings. Today we're talking about quarterbacks, and we saw a massive shakeup in how I valued the 2023 wide receiver prospects. I think the quarterbacks, they're a little bit more stagnant. Things kind of went a little bit more according to plan and how people kind of perceived their value. And the landing spots really aligned up with, the talent that the quarterbacks had to offer. So, as always, I'm talking mostly about draft capital and landing spot in today's video. If you want to go in and hear my thoughts on how the quarterbacks rank based on skill and skill, athleticism, and that sort of stuff, go check out the pre-draft rankings here on the channel. But without further ado, let's get into my quarterback one, which... Anthony Richardson, he was my pre-draft quarterback one. He is still my quarterback one. And if you remember in that pre-draft video, we said the best situation for any of these rookie quarterbacks to go to was the Indianapolis Colts under offensive guru Shane Steichen. And of course, if there's any landing spot without which Anthony Richardson was going to develop under, it was going to be with the Colts under Shane Steichen, the same guy who churned out MVP candidate quarterbacks in both Justin Herbert and Justin Fields. I think he's going to thrive in that environment. He got the 104 landing spot. He did not fall down the draft board like some analysts predicted he would. He went at the top of the rankings, and I just think that the accuracy isn't all there, as we talked about a little bit when it came to Josh Downs in terms of the wide receiver video. But as far as the fantasy value of Anthony Richardson just being a cheat code when it comes to running the football, just being a dynamic athlete and getting you points in a multitude of ways, I think he is without question, my quarterback one in this class. He is locked in at the 102 in Superflex for me. And frankly, in single quarterback leagues, he's a top 10 pick as well. Moving on, number two, there's also zero change from the pre-draft rankings. Bryce Young, the number one overall pick in the NFL draft, lands here at our quarterback two. Pre-draft ranking, quarterback two as well, so pretty consistent. Goes to the Carolina Panthers. Again, I think we can say that Bryce Young was the most technically sound quarterback coming into this class. Everything when it came to his arm, he had an above average arm, nothing crazy, not a cannon of an arm like a Levis or Richardson, but he has above average arm strength. But where he really excels is his ability to create outside of the pocket, his ability to place the ball with pinpoint accuracy on his receivers, and frankly, everything that goes on between the ears, I think, is an elite trait for Bryce Young. He goes to coach and Frank Wright, who has been called the quarterback whisperer before. Well, mostly when he's with the Eagles, didn't have that same sort of luck when he was with the Colts, but he's still touted as a great person to develop quarterbacks. I think Bryce Young is going to slot into a very young and building team in the Carolina Panthers and do very, very well for himself. I think he has the highest floor of any quarterback prospect in this class, just does not have the ceiling that Anthony Richardson does, so that's why he comes in my quarterback two. Moving on, quarterback three is going to be C.J. Stroud, the number two overall pick in the NFL draft recently. He lands with the Houston Texans, and, we talked about the best fit going with Anthony Richardson, the best overall prospect going with Bryce Young. C.J. Stroud, I don't like the fit with the Texans, and I'm also not a huge fan of him as a prospect. I'm going to touch on that lightly here because I went into a lot of my red flags and my qualms about C.J. Stroud as a prospect in the pre-draft ranking. If you want to hear me really go into that, you can go check out that video. But for C.J. Stroud, there's just a lot of inconsistency when it comes to his game. A lot of his, he was talked about a guy that could be falling through the draft until it came to that Georgia game in the college football playoffs, as well as his, the pre-draft process and his pro day and the combine and how well he tested, but there is a large sample size of data, which is the entirety of the college football regular season, that shows him as a fairly inaccurate quarterback, a fairly immobile quarterback, and a quarterback that does not have the ability to create outside of the pocket. Also one of the highest pressure to sack rates of a quarterback in the college football season last year. So he has a lot to develop as far as, there's an old mantra where the scouts say if quarterback can do it once, we can train him to do it all the time. And hopefully that they're banking on the fact that if he could be that pro caliber quarterback in the Georgia game, they can get that performance out of him every single game on a repeated basis. I don't know how well that mantra holds true, and I don't know how well the Texans coaching staff is equipped to deal with that. I mean, first off, this is a defensive-minded football team. Apparently there was some debate at the 102 between DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio as whether to take C.J. Stroud or Will Anderson. Apparently DeMeco Ryans was really big on Will Anderson, and of course, they made the concession to come up and trade up for number 3 to take Will Anderson, but, it's a mindset. It's a coach that's focused on defense. It's a coaching staff that's coming primarily from a defensive background. So as far as the upside of CJ Stroud, I think it's limited by the environment they're putting him in. They don't really have the talent that's going to develop him. Also, this is a team that didn't really do much to assist him in weapons outside. I mean, they brought in Robert Woods. They drafted Tank Dell, who I'm kind of out on as far as an outlier, as far as being one of the smallest receiver in the NFL in the past decade. They brought in Xavier Hutchinson in the 6th round, which is okay, but I think a lot of the supporting weapons around CJ Stroud is quite lackluster. I think they could have used another interior guard to help protect the pressures in the pocket. They addressed mostly defense in their draft. So I think the talent with CJ Stroud is there. I'm just not as keen on him as many other people are since he landed with the Texans. All right. QB4 is going to be Hendon Hooker. Yeah, I know. Very hot take here. But he was, again, pre-draft, he was my QB4. Post-draft, he's my QB4 as well. And that's just because I'm comparing him straight up to Will Levis. Listen, these are both guys that are going to sit. Will Levis going to the Tennessee Titans, Hendon Hooker going to the Detroit Lions. We can both anticipate them being sat for 1 year. Now, once they get out of that year, you're putting on your taxi. You're not going to get any value for them this year, which is fine. So through 2023, Hendon Hooker and Will Levis have equal value. Both is 0. But once they come out of that, yes, maybe Will Levis has the better traits. He has the larger arm, but I think Hendon Hooker is in the better environment to win. He's surrounded by a ton of skilled players, by one of the best offensive lines in the NFL with Penei Sewell and company for the Detroit Lions. He has a ton of, again, the weapons are numerous. I mean, they invested a top 12 pick into Jahmyr Gibbs, who they view as not only a running back, but just an explosive playmaker all over the field. They signed David Montgomery to the 2nd largest contract of a running back this past offseason. DJ Chark. No, they got rid of DJ Chark, but they still have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have Jamison Williams. I mean, there's just a ton of talent around him. And again, you had Ben Johnson, who was a very, very sought-after head coach prospect, actually went back to the Detroit Lions and said, no, I want to build something here. So one of the best young offensive minds in the country is still with the Detroit Lions, and I think that's what's going to give Hendon Hooker the ability to succeed years down the line. And obviously, number 5 is going to be Will Levis. Again, after he sits for this year, most likely behind Ryan Tannehill, he'll probably step in, but very similar to the situation we talked about with CJ Stroud. This is a very defensive-minded football team. We've seen the Titans take shots on quarterbacks before and be unable to develop them. Even going all the way back to the Marcus Mariota days, was never able to have him achieve the full ceiling of his ability. They took Malik Willis last year, and they gave up on him quite a bit. They didn't have the resources in there. It seemed like they wanted to throw him in, see that if he could just sink or swim, and then when he sank, they just kind of moved on to Will Levis. I think he fits more of the prototypical style that Mike Vrabel wants to run there, but I think he is incredibly raw as a prospect. And yes, his ceiling might be a little bit higher than Hendon Hooker, but just based on the situation he's going into, again, obviously not much receiving talent around him. The tight ends are okay. I do like Chigozie Okonkwo. I think he's going to take a next step this year. Obviously, you brought in running back help. You still have Derrick Henry. You probably move on from him by the time Will Levis is a starter. There's a lot of questions. I don't think the Titans are going to be a very good team, and I just don't think that spells success for Will Levis. So that's why I have him behind Hendon Hooker. A very spicy take, I know. Also, we're going to keep up through the first 5 here. They've been the exact same as their pre-draft rankings. Will Levis has always was pre-draft 5. He's now post-draft 5 as well. And we're going to keep going on because my pre-draft number 6 quarterback. Sorry, I know I said wide receiver with Will Levis. I meant to say quarterback. My pre-draft quarterback 6 was Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and he is also my post-draft quarterback 6. I just love what he has to offer when it comes to his talent and ability on the field. He does get that 4th round draft capital. He was in the 5th round, 6th pick of the 5th round, number 140 overall. Just a dude that I'm betting on the talent. He was a 5-year starter at UCLA. He has an arm. He is insanely athletic. He just needs to develop a little bit more. If something ever happens, if they restructure the Cleveland Browns, they restructured Deshaun Watson's contract in the offseason, making it a little bit easier to get off of not next year, but the year after. So if Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a guy, late round quarterback, that can come in, can play backup for Deshaun Watson. I think he will be competent, a guy that's going to be good for fantasy if he does find the field, because he does have that athletic rushing ability. And a guy that I think is at age 23 has more maturity than most of the prospects in this draft, and has more experience than many of the prospects in this draft. I'm just very enamored with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think I would have kept him here regardless of his landing spot. Number 7 is where we finally deviate from the pre-draft rankings. We're going to go see Stetson Bennett, who was unranked in my pre-draft rankings due to character concerns that I was very thorough with there. He comes in as my quarterback 7 in the post-draft rankings. He goes in the 4th round to the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams only have one quarterback currently signed to their roster, and that's Matthew Stafford, who's currently not practicing due to injury. So there really is a very, very palpable path to the field for Stetson Bennett with Los Angeles. Apparently Sean McVay and the other brass in the offensive coordinators room is very, very enamored with Stetson Bennett. They said he was one of their top draft targets coming into this draft. They said because he comes from Georgia, that it was very easy to scout him, and it's going to be very easy to transition him to an NFL pro-style offense. So they've been talking up quite a bit about Stetson Bennett. I don't know how involved he is as far as their future plans, but I think that he could come in, be a capable backup, could be a guy that starts a few games, maybe a gap quarterback next year, where, if they're going to tank next year for the draft class after Caleb Williams and Drake May, maybe he is a guy that, is their bridge quarterback to the next guy, a guy that can keep an offense afloat. Again, be fine taking a shot on him in the 4th round especially in a super flex. He's gonna see field time more likely than not. Just the upside's very, very limited as far as what Stetson Bennett can provide. Wide receiver 8 is going to be Clayton Tune out of Houston, goes to the Arizona Cardinals with the 5th pick in the 5th round. He was previously my quarterback 10, so he moves up 2 spots in my current ranking. And frankly, this is just a great situation for him to land in. Kyler Murray obviously suffered that torn ACL in week 14 or 13 of last year's season, so I don't anticipate him seeing the field anytime soon. The Cardinals may just honestly hold him out for this entire season. Colt McCoy is entering his late 30s as we speak, and was shown last year to be very, very fragile. So Clayton Tune, this big-bodied, 6'3", 220-pound quarterback coming out of Houston, is just a gamer. I mean, if you go back and watch the tape, he doesn't do anything overly well. He's an athletic quarterback. He can maneuver outside of the pocket. He can throw downfield, but he's not going to have a cannon of an arm to impress you. He's not going to have breakaway speed like a Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But he's a gamer. He's a guy that when the pressure comes down on him, he'll make the right decisions. He'll lead teams to victory. And then, if he's going to be the guy that comes in week 3 and is going to play for most of the season, why not spend a 4th round pick on having a backup quarterback that, has the potential to come in and play some fairly decent games, especially in an offense or a team that has absolutely zero defense, and which we love that fantasy. Decent offense, horrible defense means they're going to be just throwing the ball over the field, trying to put up as many points as possible, and the more points they put up, the more fantasy points you get in return. So he could be, a 4th round dart throw in a super flex league to maybe be, an interim starter throughout the 2023 season. Quarterback number 9 is going to be Jake Haener to the New Orleans Saints. He was, in my previous rankings, he was unranked. Wasn't really too enamored with what he had at Fresno State, but he comes into a really good landing spot with the Saints. I mean, they just signed, what's his face? From the Raiders. Gosh, why can't I think of his name? Derek Carr. They just signed Derek Carr from the Raiders, but, it's a 4-year deal. However, with all the deals that were signed with both Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo with his former team, the Raiders, there's always void years at the end. They're always front loaded. There's always ways to get out of the contracts at the back end. And Jake Haener, again, was just a very competent quarterback. I think he comes in, could be a developmental project, and obviously a guy that I'm not drafting even in Superflex leagues, but a guy to keep an eye on. I think, he had 4th round draft capital. The Saints value him highly enough to take him over some other defensive prospects that I like that were still on the board at that time. And if he develops well, he's obviously going to come in as the day 1 backup to Derek Carr. So if Derek Carr gets injured, he'll come in. And he had some traits. He has a very, very accurate, his accuracy is one of his best traits, and an offense that, does have some older holdovers from the Sean Payton era, an offense that, works on the quick screens, the bubble routes, the slants, and they have, they brought in Kendre Miller, a guy who's going to work well with that. He's going to work in conjunction with Alvin Kamara whenever he finishes his suspension stuff, that I think, it's just enough to make Jake Haener a capable quarterback. He might, be an average tier guy, but in Superflex, it's a guy that, as long as you have a starting quarterback, you have a chance. So a guy to keep an eye out. Not drafting him, maybe UDFA if you have a space on your roster. The last guy I want to mention here is going to be Aiden O'Connell. Very, very similar. Can I just copy and paste what I said about Jake Haener to Aiden O'Connell? They signed Jimmy Garoppolo. It's a 3-year contract. You can get out of it after next year, frankly, if you want to. More likely they'll be getting out of it after 2 years of that. Last year on the contract for Jimmy Garoppolo is a void year. Again, he does get that 4th round draft capital, pick 135 overall. So again, pretty decent capital for a quarterback. This is also Josh McDaniels we're talking about, the guy that developed Jacoby Brissett, developed Jimmy Garoppolo, developed these later round, Jarrett Stidham even, between his time both with the Patriots and with the Raiders. So, this is a guy that knows how to identify, as much as I hate to say it about a former Patriot and a guy that I'm not a huge fan of, Josh McDaniel, he's a guy that can identify quarterback talent and can develop it and is a good landing spot for Aiden O'Connell. So, even the draft capital would not signify him as a starting quarterback in this league. It might be a guy that, Josh McDaniels can work his magic on and turn into a starter maybe next year or 2 years down the line. And obviously Jimmy Garoppolo has a very, very illustrious injury history. I think Aiden O'Connell comes into Raiders as a day 1 backup, just like Jake Haener is. So again, a guy that you can pick up off waivers if you need a spot start. And I think they do have plenty of weapons. Devontae Adams, enough said. And Michael Mayer. I'm a huge fan of Michael Mayer. I love that draft pick for the Raiders. So, and I've always said, tight ends are a rookie safety blanket. I believe Aiden O'Connell will come in, and if he does have to spot start for Jimmy Garoppolo, he'll have he'll be decent enough to carry the team and be a desperation start in a super flex. So just a guy to keep an eye on. So also that's my top 10 quarterbacks. We went through them. A guy that's an honorable mention, a guy that I think is just a really fun name to keep an eye on, is Malik Cunningham, the UDFA that went to the Patriots. Bill Belichick has always had this infatuation with these mobile running quarterbacks. Obviously, he's talked about how great Lamar is, very unprompted too, in press conference, not even when they were rumored to sign him this past year, but in previous years, talked about how great Lamar is. He signed Cam Newton. He's always drafting these later round mobile quarterbacks. So I think it's something to be said that Malik Willis has the highest UDFA contract in the history of the NFL, and it's equivalent to a contract given to a 5th round prospect. So if the truth is that if Bill O'Brien and Bill Belichick are both out on Mac Jones up there in New England, Malik Cunningham could come in and, be the next late round quarterback starter to come in and start for the Patriots. And he was incredible at Louisville. I love the talent that he brings to the field. So definitely a guy that if you have a really, really deep league and you got some open bench spots or open taxi spots, stash them. I like them a lot. So that's going to wrap up the quarterback rankings. We'll come back to you next time with some running back rankings. And until then, take care.